Jaya Prabhuji. Hello, welcome to the Retroprogressive Yoga Institute. My name is Swami Omkarananda. This is the second class in the course that we are doing to study the book of Prabhuji, Advaita Vedanta, Being the Self. In the previous class, we present the structure of this course divided in different sections, and today we do the introductory lecture in which we will try to answer to the question, what is Vedanta? Now, Prabhuji very often starts his explanations by defining the etymology of a term that we are going to discuss. The words have sounds and the sounds have meanings, and the words have history, a history of being chosen as a way to convey certain idea one to the other. So before we start debating on the idea, it's important to agree on the definition of it. And what is important for the definition is to understand how the word was originated and what originally it tried to convey. And that's how etymology breaks down the meaning of and the components of a term and explain us the meaning behind it. So no wonder that Prabhuji starts his explanation of what is Vedanta by explaining the etymology of the term Vedanta. Let's see it. Vedanta is composed of two words actually. Veda, which is knowledge or wisdom, and Anta, which is the end or the conclusion. Now, Prabhuji explains that the meaning of this term can be understood in different ways. It can be understood as the highest spiritual knowledge, that's why it's the conclusion of the knowledge, the culmination of wisdom, the end of or the peak of the wisdom, or it can be said that it's because it's the last section of the Vedas, which is the Upanishad, and this path is based on that section. The other day, Prabhuji asked me, what are you studying? And I told him that I'm studying his book on Advaita Vedanta. And I'm getting ready for the next class, which is about what is Vedanta. So he asked me, so what is Vedanta? I said Vedanta can mean the highest knowledge, the culmination of wisdom, the last part of the Vedas. Now, Prabhuji gives a lot in his books, and also in the internal talks that we managed to record and share. But a lot of pearls of wisdoms are given in the darshans and in the personal conversations with Prabhuji. So this institute is an opportunity for the disciples to share those that otherwise will stay only recorded in our souls. So he said, Vedanta is actually, you know what is religion, right? Yes. So religion is religare, from the word religare. And again, Prabhuji breaks down very often the terms and explains them further. Religare is reconnect. A religion is a path of reconnection. Well, Vedanta is already the state of union. Religion gives a way to arrive to the state of union. Vedanta is just a description of the state itself. Therefore, Vedanta is not a path, it's not a system, it's not a method to arrive to union, it's just the union. It's the description of the rishis from the state of realization that they describe and share what they can share, and this is the Vedanta. He gave a comparison. He said, you know, you have a tourist guide that guides you to a certain destination, so it gives you the path. But Vedanta is from the destination shouting you, is here, come here, here it is. This is the shouting from the destination, from the state of arrival. So it's the point of the culmination, because it's the end of the path, it's the state of union with from the Atma and Brahman, the self and the divine, the realization that there is no separation. In chapter 1, the section What is Vedanta starts with the following paragraph. Western Indology scholars treat Vedanta as a philosophy, a school of thought, or a theology. This book does not present an academic perspective on Vedanta, but the view that the Vedanta tradition has about itself. Vedanta has awakened a lot of interest in the academic field, in the studies of Indology. Is clearly a very sophisticated system. But when looked at Vedanta from outside, it can be understood as a philosophy. Very often Vedanta is called one of the school of thoughts of the Indian tradition. Now, Prabhuji says here, looked at this with the Western eyes, with the Western perspective, meaning from the outside perspective, it can be seen as a philosophy, as a school of thought, as a theology. But here, I'm not going to present an academic analysis of the Vedanta. This is not what this book is about. This book is about Vedanta itself, what Vedanta says about itself. Prabhuji is describing the state of realization, and the state of realization was beautifully described by the rishis, and this is what Prabhuji is going to share, how the rishis explained. So this is how Prabhuji explains this state of himself through the terminology and the beauty of the Vedanta. So he said, I'm only interested about Vedanta itself. I want to look at Vedanta from the inside, not to analyze it, not to add it to my collection of different paths in the way, but I want to live the Vedanta and to explain it from inside. So what we are going to do in this class is to break down this very paragraph. In order to know why Prabhuji says that Vedanta is not a philosophy, we need to understand a bit more what is philosophy, why it's not a school of thought. There is a lot of conclusions and thoughts and statements, but this Vedanta is not a school of thought. And moreover, Vedanta is not a theology, it's not a religion. So, and what Vedanta thinks about itself. This will be this class about. So let's start by the part Vedanta is not a philosophy. In order to understand this, I'm sharing part of his article, Philosophy and Religion. When wonder is experienced from the intellect, we are inclined to think, reflect, and speculate. Curiosity for life transforms the mystery into a riddle that awakens questions. Philosophy arises as an intellectual effort to give meaning to life's questions why and for what. For philosophers, life is an enigma to be solved. For religious masters, however, life is a miracle to be lived and celebrated with deep gratitude. Many things to break down in this short paragraph. Let's start from the wonder. It is said that the origin of the Greek philosophy is the wonder of life, of the meaning, the nature, the humans, creation, origins. This wonder about this make us try to understand. And these efforts to understand give rise to the philosophy. Now, when this wonder is understood as an intellectual effort, that I need to solve it, it's a riddle, I need to resolve it, and I can resolve it with my intellectual efforts, I can understand, this is philosophy. But Vedanta is not the effort to understand this intellectually. It's to stay in the wonder, because the state of wonder is closer to the state of union. So to dwell in the wonder, to cultivate the wonder. Prabhuji says that I have no no virtues, but only one thing. I didn't let this wonder to die in me. I stay a kid. I didn't let the curiosity be buried under answers. I stayed in the curiosity. I stayed in the wonder. And the wonder is a magnet that brings us to the origin of the wonder, because we are wonder ourselves. So if we try to solve the wonder as something separate, I will solve the wonder. I will give answers to the mystery. So we separate. And then everything that is this wonder in a way is this call to reunion. It will stay buried in the intellectual efforts. So Prabhuji speaks about questions. Philosophy arises questions to solve this riddle. So why and for what? Why? What is the causation? What are the reasons? For what? What is the purpose? What is the meaning? So I want to understand what are the purpose. And from there, many philosophies arise that give different answers. So the answer of certain philosophy can give one set of system of causation and reason and ontology, and other can give it, because it's a mental speculation. Different people that think about these things, so came up with different theories or different options. But that is not Vedanta. Vedanta is to stay in the curiosity, to stay in this wonder, and to celebrate the wonder. If you can only stay in the wonder without the interventions of these egoic efforts to try to conquer and solve and resolve, because in the moment that we resolve the mystery just loses its magic. Prabhuji says it's much better to stay in this state of wonder, because a state of wonder is a state of awareness. You know, we have this state of indifference, like in the moment that we take the mystery and put it through the mind with words, with definitions, with answers, the wonder is not wonder anymore. The curiosity just dies. Curiosity is when we don't know. And Prabhuji says it's to stay in the unknown, to let this curiosity and wonder lead us to the source from where it comes. Remember that we speak about Vedanta. It's a state of union of the Brahman with the Atman, until the realization that there is no difference. There is actually nothing to unite. It's just to be aware of the state of union. And that's connected to the fact that this is the conclusion, because the rishis of the Vedanta who saw the state of union, and we see that our confusion and our worthless efforts to solve this is say to us, you are already there. You don't need to do any effort. Every effort is making you farther away. This is the dichotomy of the spiritual path, that if we are all indifferent, completely oblivious and uninterested in any spiritual realm, and only busy with the tangible and the sensible, we might not experience, although it's our nature, right? But we might not be aware of the state of union. But if we are eager to solve it, and this curiosity and wonder awakes in us, is a step forward. Prabhuji has deep admiration for everybody that try in some way or other to solve the mystery. He has only praise to them, but he's saying from the state of union, he's shouting, but not through the intellect. That is not the way. This is putting you farther away, because the intellect is actually the problem itself. So the intellect will not solve. And Prabhuji said, you know, in different day, I said, you know, Prabhuji, you said in your book that Vedanta is not a philosophy. He said, but this is very confusing, because Vedanta is considered by everybody a philosophy. It's system of philosophy. It's very respected and admired even as a system of philosophy. So why you say that Vedanta is not a philosophy? So here the parts that they don't appear in the books. So this is what I can share. He said, philosophy is to ask questions. That's it. Philosophy is to ask questions. Philosophy cannot give answers. It's not meant to be answered. Philosophy is the art of thinking. It's the art of questioning, but it's not a path for answers. Vedanta is just the answer. That's it. It's the answer. But philosophy is just the questions. And then he gave a few examples. He said, you know, like you have this device that you can put it on the wall and it can detect short circuits, and it gives you a signal. So this is the device where it can point out the problem, but the device itself will not solve the short circuit. It's just detecting the secret, but it's not resolving it. It's just all what philosophy can do is to point to the problems, is to raise the questions, which is it's a step, right? Because if you don't even ask the questions, you will not be completely uninterested in advancing, elevating your level of consciousness, opening yourself to the mystery. So the questions are welcome, but that's not Vedanta. Vedanta is the answer. Vedanta is a description of the state of union. Then he said another example. He said, you know, like we walk on a treadmill, right? So we walk in the treadmill. Now, where the treadmill can lead you, to which destination? It's not meant to lead you to any destination. It's just meant to develop your resistance, your muscles, but it's not meant to arrive anywhere. But it has a value, right? Because it does develop you. And with this muscle, you might arrive to your destination, but not through the treadmill. So the philosophy is the treadmill. It develops your ability to ask questions, which is an important ability, but it's not the answer. The treadmill will help you to develop your... Now, in the same way, the philosophy is a treadmill for the thinking process, because you learn to think better. But how thinking can lead you to union? It's just not. Vedanta is not a philosophy. In order for the state of union, you don't need to think. You don't need to speculate. You don't need to question. You need to stay in the wonder, in the mystery. You need to celebrate life. This is what Prabhuji says here. You need to celebrate this state, because wisely Vedanta says that you don't need to add anything to yourself. You don't need to develop any ability, because when we describe you as you are, in your true nature, what are you missing? It's just the realization that I'm not missing anything. And it seems so easy, but it's the most complex for a human mind to say, as you are complete. As you are yourself. You cannot be anything that is not you. That's anti-ego. Ego, it's all about lack, missing. I'm missing something. I need to arrive somewhere. I need to do efforts. It needs to be my efforts, my own efforts. This state of independence and disconnection from Brahman, this is the state of the human forgetfulness. And if anything, Vedanta speaks about a remembrance. It's not even an acquisition of knowledge. It's the path of knowledge, we said before. It's the Vedanta, is the path of the knowledge. But it's not to add certain knowledge. It's just the state of culmination of knowledge. When you understand, oh, yes, I always knew. It is something so characteristic of realized beings. Realized beings have many things in common because they describe the same state and very different paths and different traditions and different times. But one thing I pay attention is that I always knew the state of union is a state that is already here. It's just overlooked. And enlightenment is just to stop overlooking this, but it's not to acquire. Prabhuji says, you are enlightened and everybody is enlightened. And he means it. He means it. It's just you are not aware of it. But this doesn't change the fact that you are. You are Brahman. The fact that you don't know that you are Brahman. Okay, that's why we need the path of knowledge, the path of rishis that describe that you are Brahman, that remind you, because it might resonate with you, because you already know it. It might be you might be arrived enough in your state of awareness that you said, oh, right, I am Brahman. Maybe this is all what you need to remember. But if we need more, the Upanishads are there to remind us in different ways, like in very creative ways to convey us this subtle truth. But Vedanta is the path described by the rishis, which were in the state of realization, conveying the words, not telling you need to do something, you need to acquire something, you need to practice, this is the path, but just telling you, describing the state of union, so you might remember your state of union. Vedanta is not a school of thought. Prabhuji writes, the discipline of philosophy puts the mind on an altar and thought on the throne, spurning our essential reality. Philosophy uses the mind. Religion is about transcending thought. It is extremely difficult to walk both paths simultaneously because they have opposite directions. Philosophy is the path of the intellect and religion is the path of meditation. Philosophy is about unveiling the enigma. Religion is about making ourselves accessible to the mystery. Philosophy is the mind's effort to control and master the unknown. The tool of philosophy is the mind. And Prabhuji says here that philosophy worships the mind, put it in an altar. This is my tool, this is my pride, I can think. He put the intellect in the throne, is the king. The intellect is the way that will help me out of this mystery. The path of the spirit, in this case Prabhuji generally call it religion, but it's the spiritual path, in whichever way will be expressed, is using the intellect, but to transcend the intellect. This is how interesting it is, because Jnana Yoga, it says that it is the path of knowledge, of thinking, of intellect, of buddhi, but it's not to worship it, not to put it. It's just to understand the limitations of the intellect. That's all. It's a path. Prabhuji says the other day, the Vedanta uses the reason to explore into the nature of reason in order to transcend reason. So it is the path of reason? Not really. It's not worshipping reason. It's just taking this out of the way. Because it says, I cannot solve the unknown. This is impossible. It's an impossible effort to solve the unknown. When this curiosity arises in your heart, don't let it die by giving it answers. Don't let it bury it with the known. In the moment that we take the mystery and we explain it, it stops being a mystery, but it also loses its magic. So instead of solving, Prabhuji said, surrender to this mystery. It's so difficult. It's like, it's anti-ego. That's why, because we want the control. We want to know. That's the nature of the ego. And to surrender to the mystery, it's necessarily an anti-egoic effort. Not efforts, surrender. It's like when we let love to win the battle over the intellect. What happened then? You take more risk, you are more vulnerable, you are out of control, but you are happy, realized, ecstatic. This is the Prabhuji says there is a word behind the intellect and you don't know it because it's behind the veil of your intellect. So if you look at reality from the veil of the intellect, you just conceptualize everything and you don't see the wholeness of your existence. And moreover, you define yourself. You narrow yourself. What Vedanta comes to say is that you are Brahman. He said, I am Brahman? Yes. How I can be Brahman? What is Brahman? Brahman is everything. I am everything? Yes. What that means that you, as you know it, you are not. That's why it's the path of neti neti. It comes to tell you, you are not what you think you are. You are not the intellect. You are not the body. You came to be identified with this contracted consciousness. The path of Vedanta tells you, you are consciousness. You are not a contracted consciousness. And if you want to realize it, you don't need to think about, because the thinking itself is what contracts you. So you cannot resolve it with the source of your disconnection. And it's because it's the way we know to solve things, because the intellect is the way to resolve problems in the level of duality. So we think that the same tool is the only tool I know. This is my ability, that's why we worship it, we put it in the altar, we try to solve everything through the intellect. And then we suffer and we stay in... The truth is that the origin of suffering is disconnection. This is the very origin of suffering. Now we have certain distress, that's why things arise. There's uncertainty of our temporality. It causes a lot of distress. So we want to understand what is death, what is life. Is there anything after I leave the body? So the awareness of the certainty of my temporality put us in such a state of distress that we just try to negate this option, try to live as if it doesn't exist. Sometimes I feel that this is my contemplation, that because we know that we are eternal, deep we know. Like this negation is like, I try to say, I don't want even to think about my temporality, because it's like contradicting my underlying conviction that I'm not going to die. And we think that we are not going to die. But if we are identified with the body, yes, we are going to die. We have something else that is eternal in us, that is the Brahman in us. It's not going to die. So if we don't realize it, we are going to die. And we better face it. We better face this fear instead of running away, instead of trying to solve it with a thinking process. This is, the Vedanta comes to say, you're not going to resolve it. You better surrender to it. Surrender to the fact that you are temporal. And if you stop this contraction and be able to surrender to whatever is life's will, because our temporality is not our choice, but life has better plans for us. This is what the rishis come to say. you can realize your eternity. Then you will know that you are not going to die. You are not going. Realize your eternity within the temporality. This is the peak of the process of the forgetfulness of consciousness and the remembrance of. That's why this knowledge is so precious, because it's the testimony of those who are in that state and come to tell, no, don't put the thought in the altar. You are worshipping the wrong God. You just surrender to the mystery, to the curiosity, to the wonder, and let yourself celebrate this state of unknownness, because the state of knowing, not only it's impossible to solve the mystery through the intellect, it keeps you in the separated consciousness, and then you suffer. So they're trying to do, now, if you're lucky enough to have this curiosity, and also if you're lucky enough to have these mentors that come to tell you no through the intellect, believe me, I was there, not through the intellect. You need to develop these qualities that the Vedanta explains, that will just allow you to surrender to the mystery in you and live it, and live from the mystery, live from the question, stay in the question. Very often Prabhuji said, stay in the question. You have a question, stay in the question. The question will be the answer, but if you do efforts to answer it, so you will kill the question, because every question wants to die, like every waves will die in the shore. But stay in the water and stay and celebrate your state of union. Live life from the water perspective, not from the wave perspective. And then water doesn't die, only the wave can die in the ocean. So this is the state that why Vedanta says that Vedanta is not a school of thought. Vedanta is not a theology. Prabhuji writes, authentic seekers of truth do not aspire only to know it, but to be it. Genuine religious beings are not satisfied with theology and do not seek only to know about God, but long to realize it. As Shams I. Tabrizi said, intellect takes you to the door, but it doesn't take you into the house. Here we see that Prabhuji compares to know and to be. This is so central in his retroprogressive message. It's not about knowing, it's about being, becoming it. And to understand this, wow, we need to we don't need to think about it, because to think about it is to know it. It need to become it. Those are the qualities. There is no way around. It's the anti-ego. The ego is the one who wants to know and to be in control and to be in separation. And the work with the spiritual master is this surrender. This surrender to the ego. What is the ego? Is the contraction of the will. Ego is the will, because the ego is the tool of survival, right? So we want to survive, we want to be in control, we want security, we want. So all this state, Prabhuji sometimes says the ego is not someone, it's not something, you cannot touch the ego. It's just like a whirlpool in the water, like contraction. It gets contracted, but it's part of the water, so it just needs to relax. So this contraction is the ego. The ego wants to know, but to know is just theology. So I know about God. I have a description. I have a system. I have answers. Oh, Vedanta is not about answers. But actually, it's not about God at all. God is not of course, not a personal God, and we will study this when we get to the section of theology in Vedanta. What is the place of theology, if at all? But as Prabhuji explained in the beginning, Vedanta is not a religion that brings you to union with some big being, or that you need to please him or do his will. It's nothing about that. Vedanta is to become the whole, to become the, we call it Brahman just because we will study further what Vedanta means about Brahman. Brahman is God? No. Brahman is not God. It's not God. Brahman is the state of, Brahman is awareness, the same awareness that you used to hear me now, and I used to talk to you now. This is the underlying awareness. And this separation is not real. This is what the Vedanta comes to say. And then he said that the theology wants to know about God, but it's not about knowing, it's about becoming. Now, he gives this beautiful quote from Shams that he said, you can use the intellect to reach to the door, and that's why Vedanta does use the intellect in a certain way. But he knows that with the intellect you cannot go into the house. So you can reach to the door, and for that, Prabhuji calls the intellect the development of the questioning. But answers, no. Answers are when we throw the intellect. There all the answers appear. The answer will not be within the intellect, but the intellect might help us to drop it. If we try enough, we might get convinced that it's not through the intellect. Sometimes, the realization comes in the point of exhaustion. Prabhuji describes his realization when he tries so much. He studied and practiced and did all the efforts. He tries so much. He has such a passion, the wonder, the curiosity of Prabhuji was so intense that he led him through 30 years of intense and non-stop search. I wish myself and everybody this level of passion for the truth. And he said it was a point of hopelessness, that I didn't expect nothing to happen. It's just all of a sudden from nowhere. And then I understood that all was worthless. And, many times he told us, you don't need to do so much efforts. I can tell you, it's worthless. You just surrender to it. So from that place of understanding himself, that's not the path. That's not the way to go into the house. He's guiding us, he's writing his books, and he's telling us that it's not the intellect, but together with that, to develop the intellect, to get to the door, is a good way to understand that there is no way through the intellect. That's why it's not a theology, because theology is to think about God. And we don't want to think about God. That would not quench our thirst. We want to unite. We want to become. This is what Prabhuji teaches here. So finally, we got to the stage. So, okay, we understand Prabhuji started by saying it's not a philosophy, it's not a school of thought, it's not a theology. So, what is Vedanta? So, what Vedanta says about itself. And for that, he brings a verse from the Vedanta Sara. Vedanto namo Upanishad pramanam tad upakarini shariraka sutradini. Vedanta is the means of knowledge, pramana, of the Upanishads. The Shariraka Sutra and other books help to correctly expound its meaning. Prabhuji brings the definition from within the Vedanta. From the Vedanta Sara, which is a book written by Sadananda Saraswati, a Vedanti from the 15th century that summarizes, and the book will quote many times, the essence of the Vedanta Sara, because it's a classical and book of studying the principles of Vedanta for beginners, and it brings many of the definitions. So what this verse says, Vedanta is a pramana, is a means of knowledge, which is studied in the Upanishads and in the Vedanta Sutras, Brahma Sutras. And what that means, which is a pramana, a means of knowledge. So we will dedicate a section for the epistemology of Vedanta, which studies the means of acquiring knowledge. And we will see that the pramanam, the highest pramanam, is the Shabda, is the direct testimony from seers. So the Vedanta says it's just a pramanam. Pramanam is a means of knowledge. How we can acquire knowledge? Through the senses. We can acquire knowledge through anumana, through rational inference. We can acquire knowledge. But the highest, according to Vedanta, is the pramanam of Shabda. And the Upanishads are the testimony of the seers. That's all. The maximum, the aspiration, the Vedanta leads to a first-hand experience of the unity with the divine. That's all about. We said Brahma Satyam, Brahman is real, Jagat Mithya, the world is apparent or illusionary, Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. You are Brahman. There is no difference between you and Brahman. That's the summary of the Vedanta. So here is said, the Vedanta is a pramana. What that means, it's just a means, a way to know this, that there is no separation. So what will help me to know? It's just, if you want to achieve this state, you don't need to do anything, we just need to know. And how you know? By the testimony of those who are in this state. That's all. So the Vedanta brings you a testimony of realized beings that tell you the state that you are in is not your true nature. Your true nature is eternal unity, consciousness, awareness, omniscience. But this is not my experience. And the seer said, yes, it's not your sensual experience, because through the senses you cannot realize this experience. Through the intellect, through the thought, you cannot experience this. But why it's a means of knowledge, you think that you are in the darkness and you cannot see. You are inside a dark room. So the pramana give you the testimony of one who has night vision headset and can tell you what is there in the room, and you cannot see, but that doesn't mean that doesn't exist. Just say that you don't have the tools to see. So moreover, Vedanta tells just open your eyes. You are not really in the darkness, you just have your eyes closed. You need to open your eyes. But which eyes? Not the eyes of the perception, but the eyes of awareness. So you just need to open the eyes. Now, if you choose the experience of going in the dark and not seeing whatever is in the room, that's okay. It's also an experience. If you want the adventure of all suffering and falling and going into things because you don't open your eyes, that's your choice. The awareness can also choose to be not aware. That's part of the eternal choice of the awareness, and this is our state. But the Brahmanan is the one who describes what is in the room that you don't see because you choose to close your eyes. So by these descriptions, we might be tempted to open the eyes. And this is a good comparison, because to close the eyes is effort. You need to close. You need to do an effort to close. And this is our state. We are effortlessly holding to the state of darkness. For some reason, I'm still trying to understand the reason. Maybe because is the known, maybe because it's the will of Brahman to experience also darkness. But if you hear these testimonies, you know that to open the eyes is to relax this contraction. It's not to do an effort. The opposite is to stop the effort. And then you will see the light of day that will illuminate. And then it will explain also this duality. Duality is a state of reality, according to Vedanta. So it's a level of reality that you can experience in which there is separation between the seer and the seen, but this is not the ultimate state. So it can, from the state of union, even the duality can be celebrated. This is Prabhuji mentioned this. It's the seers celebrate life because it's an amazing adventure. It's joyful to experience the separation of lover and beloved. Is a state in which we can love and experience fear, things that we cannot experience in eternity. It's also an experience. It's also an experience in Brahman. But when it's lived from the state of awareness, everything can be celebrated. And when it's lived from the state of identification, it's a torture. Life is tough. Life is painful. And it doesn't need to be this way. Because there is an alternative, and this is what the Vedanta comes to share. The state to live with open eyes, a totally different experience. So this is what Vedanta thinks about itself, that it's just a means of knowing the supra-sensible. Not the sensible, not the perceptible, but the supra-perceptible. So how we can know about it? Not with the eyes and not with the mind, but with the testimony of those who describe this state. And by hearing this testimony, we might dare to look ourselves on something that is already here. So this is what is Vedanta according to itself, and how kindly Prabhuji explained this to us. So, Jai Prabhuji.